Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to our kind of, sort of, occasionally weekly podcast. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. I write the Illinoize political newsletter, which you can find for free at the Illinoize, ILLINOICE.com. Coming up on our show today, lots of discussion on the latest controversy surrounding Governor J.B. Pritzker's appointments to the Prisoner Review Board, which is the state's parole board. We'll talk to State Senator Jason Plummer, a Republican from Edwardsville, who's been one of the louder voices in the Senate on the subject dating back a couple of years. We'll also have some comments from the governor himself. We'll also be joined later in the show by Greg Pratt, a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, who has a new book out on the tumultuous term of former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Let's begin, though, with the Prisoner Review Board. Two members of the PRB have resigned after Crosetti Brand, a Chicago man charged with stabbing his pregnant ex-girlfriend and killing her 11-year-old son, Jayden Perkins, the day after he was paroled. Perkins was killed trying to protect his mother. This piece aired on CNN.
It shouldn't be that I'm talking about Jayden in the past tense. But last Wednesday morning, in his final moments, Jayden had been getting ready for school, just like any other 11-year-old. His mother, who is pregnant, was there, so was his 5-year-old brother. And in an instant, a moment that was like dozens of others that had come before it, suddenly became a nightmare. The suspect, with a long history of domestic abuse, invaded their home, stabbed his mother several times. Jayden was the one who jumped to her defense. He was her protector, at just 11 years old. Because of his courageous act, an act of instinct, an act of love, he too was attacked. He didn't make it. His life ended in what was supposed to be the safest of places.
I will be honest, I'm struggling this morning. Having to do this work, and we all do this work. Imagine these officers showing up at a home and seeing an 11-year-old boy bleeding out who was trying to defend his mother.
Jayden's mom did survive, and his little brother watched him breathe his last breaths. As is so often the case, the grown-ups here failed Jayden Perkins. This attack was not unexpected. It was not a surprise, and it should not have happened. A decade ago, this suspect had been sentenced to 16 years for domestic abuse and for a violent home invasion. And just last year, he was released on parole. After violating that, he was sent back to prison. Then, just weeks ago, Jayden's mother filed for a protective order against this suspect, whom she had a relationship with more than a decade ago. But she never got one. A judge denied her request, saying there was no emergency because he was still behind bars, even though the suspect allegedly sent her threatening messages, warning her that he would kill her and her children. Despite all of this, last week, he was again released on parole. And not 24 hours later, he came to their home. He was accused of following through on those very threats. Notably, the Illinois Prisoner Review Board says they were not aware of that protective request. But Jayden's mom will never see him grow up. She'll never see him go to prom, perhaps star on Broadway, become a dad. Tonight, his bed is empty. His pillow is still there, carrying his scent, his book bag, just as he left it. Jayden's community is stunned, understandably. The outpouring of messages, of grief, of regret, it's palpable. Somehow, the system failed Jayden. The adults who were supposed to protect him and his whole family failed.
Makes me angry. Leanne Miller and Donald Shelton resigned from the Prisoner Review Board as a result. Miller wrote the report recommending Brand's release from prison. Governor J.B. Pritzker was pressed on the issue last week.
Share your thoughts on why the chairman resigned, and also if this highlights any sort of changes that you should see for the board. Should they be nonpartisan? What types of reforms should there be?
Yeah, thank you for asking. First of all, the death of an 11-year-old boy is unbelievably tragic, and under any circumstances, and these especially. I think that the members of the PRB, as you know, are of both parties. They're nominated and approved by the Senate. And I think that as you know, the leader of the panel that made the decision to let the prisoner Brand out has resigned. I think that was probably a proper decision on her part. And I think that the chairman of the PRB, who served admirably for 11 years, also a Republican, chose to leave. I did not express any reason in particular, but I think that the changes that are necessary here are evident in the fact that the panel didn't take into consideration enough the domestic violence history of this particular prisoner, and the fact that there were reports by the victim of that person knocking on her door, being around her apartment building, et cetera. And so one thing that we've decided to do is to make sure that we enhance the domestic violence training that all PRB members get, including all the ones that are there now, and of course any new ones that are proposed, to make sure that this never happens again. Yes.
Hi. Related question. How close are you to starting the process of replacing those two members? And have you found any hesitancy among folks to take that job?
Well, the more that people politicize the position, the less likely it is that someone would want to serve in it. And as you know, there have been people in the General Assembly, typically the opposite party, who have politicized this. So it makes it more difficult. But we have not, this has been a very short period of time. I think we're talking about 5 work days so far since the resignations, the two. And so obviously we're contemplating that we need to make nominations to those positions, but we don't have any decisions yet.
It's no surprise. It's straight out of the governor's playbook that this is somebody else's fault, that it's Republicans' fault for politicizing his appointments, criticizing his appointments when it's clearly the direction of his administration. It's clearly the direction of his progressive politics that have moved this board, that have made these decisions so much more lenient. That's the issue at hand. That's why 15 Senate Democrats voted against some of Pritzker's PRB appointees in 2022. That's why 2 more were withdrew or resigned before a vote, because they knew that they were never going to get approved, because they were way off the beaten path. The governor takes no accountability on those issues, and that's incredibly frustrating. Let's turn now to comments from Senator Jason Plummer. All right, let's get the Republican perspective on this from State Senator Jason Plummer, a Republican from Edwardsville, who's on the Executive Appointments Committee that handles these appointments and has been a vocal critic of the governor's appointments to the Prisoner Review Board and others over the last few years. Senator, welcome. Let's start with the issue, I think, from maybe not from the beginning, because some of these issues even predate J.B. Pritzker, but this really started to be an issue, maybe post-pandemic when Republicans started to raise issues with Governor Pritzker's appointments. Why and where did that come from?
Well, thanks for having me, Patrick. I appreciate it. I think it's important to talk about this in a non-politicized environment, because this public safety is not a political issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue, as far as I'm concerned. I disagree with the one statement in the opening, and that, you know, a lot of these issues predate Governor Pritzker. I don't believe that they do, and I think data supports my contention there. Really, this started in 2020, and it started in 2020 when we started to notice, and when I say we, I mean the senators and the Republican staff that serve in the Executive Appointments Committee, that the PRB started releasing some very controversial people. And that caused us to dig a little bit deeper. And when we started digging deeper, we noticed that the voting patterns of the PRB had changed dramatically, let's say in the last year or 18 months, basically since J.B. Pritzker took office. And we also noticed that transparency at the PRB had changed dramatically, in the sense that they're supposed to post minutes of the hearings online. They're supposed to be responsive to FOIAs, and there were real problems there. And so all of that kind of started happening late 2020, early 2021, and they were all kind of new occurrences under this administration.
But to be fair, you know, some of these appointments, like Donald Shelton, who just resigned, who's a Republican, by the way, they date back to Pat Quinn. You know, so it's not like these are all brand new people that are ushering in some wild progressive agenda, right?
Well, no, and I think that's an important thing to highlight. We have not objected to all of the members of the Prisoner Review Board, which is a 15-person body, or it's supposed to be a 15-person body. We have not objected to all of them. I have no objections to Mr. Shelton. By all accounts, in fact, I think he's the new chairman. He became the new chairman because we were able to force change, and he replaced the previous chairman, who I think was very problematic. I think Shelton was a positive influence on the PRB. I think we started to see some good changes under him. You know, I think his resignation due to what happened here is it leaves a lot to be answered by the governor's administration. Is why is Shelton gone? Because I think he had started to move the PRB in a good direction, and we didn't object to him.
Is it really a surprise, though, that the most progressive, most liberal governor in the history of the state, and we're talking the same state that John Peter Altgeld came from, is moving his administration in a progressive direction? I mean, that just kind of falls in line, doesn't it?
It does. And, you know, I laugh whenever the governor talks about the PRB process being politicized, because I'm the Republican spokesman on executive appointments, and we see hundreds of appointees to boards, commissions, agencies every year. I haven't raised that many flags at the executive appointments committee level, because I believe the governor was elected governor, and I believe he has the right to appoint generally who he wants to all of these various positions. My job isn't to measure the appointees by their politics, many of which I disagree with. My job is to review them to make sure that they're competent and qualified for the position that they're being appointed to. And that's where the objection is. There's a lot of people I vote in favor of. I don't agree with their politics, but I don't think that their politics should impact, you know, their position. What we've seen specifically at the PRB is a manipulation of the process that we have not seen for these other boards and commissions. We have not seen for the hundreds of other people. It is specific to PRB. And our objection hasn't been he's appointing liberal people or Democrats. Our objection has been he's flat out appointing unqualified people who shouldn't be in the role. That's not all 15 people. That's just certain appointees.
So it really seemed like this came to a head in 2022, because you had two appointees who were rejected with, by the way, I think 14 or 15 Senate Democrats who voted against them. So it wasn't, we all know the supermajority, super minority situation in Springfield, that you guys can't kill an appointment on your own. You had a lot of Democrats jump on board and kill those two appointments. Another resigned because there was no way he was going to win or get the vote, and another was withdrawn. One of whom was a convicted double murderer when he was 16. Max Serta, I think this guy's name was, who served his time, and then had spent his adult life, his reintroduction to society, helping young people get out of prison and get reintroduced into the world. Is there a place, and there are questions about, who he voted for, like a former cellmate or that sort of thing, someone he served with. So there were extenuating circumstances there, which I understand. But do you look at someone like that and say that's a different point of view that isn't totally unwelcome in this situation?
Yeah, again, the only person that has interjected, politics into this is the governor's office. When these people appeared before the committee, our questions were specific to their qualifications and specific to some votes they had cast. And if you dig into the data, Patrick, the Prisoner Review Board, and I'm going to get into the weeds here for a second, I hope you don't mind, but the Prisoner Review Board shifted dramatically once J.B. Pritzker took office. Different than under Governor Blagojevich, different than under Governor Quinn, different than under Governor Round, Republicans and Democrats. Under those three administrations, it was pretty consistent. And then J.B. Pritzker came into office and it went like this. And you saw a dramatic change in the voting patterns at the PRB, the quantity of violent criminals that were being released. So naturally, we had questions about that. And something that I thought was extremely curious was even some of the people who served under those prior administrators, served on the PRB in those prior administrations, their personal voting habits even changed in some instances as well. So, why would someone change their voting patterns? Well, then we started digging into it, and you said, hey, this came to a head in 2022, largely came to a head in 2022. Some of these people had been serving on the PRB, Patrick, for many months, in some instances years, casting votes, getting paid, but not coming before the Senate. Now, I would say that that's a manipulation of the process. It was wildly improper, and I think more people should have raised the alarm there. Why were those people not coming before the committee? Well, in some instances, I think they were appointees that were not, the governor in good conscience could not defend their qualifications. I think in some instances, once they're confirmed by the Senate, they're serving on the PRB. If their appointment continues to sit in the governor's office and he can play these games with appointing, withdrawing, reappointing, and these people are getting paid $100,000 a year, $95,000 a year, until they get that final confirmation from the Senate, they're probably going to toe the line to what the administration wants. And I think the administration enjoyed controlling these appointments rather than letting them move through the Senate and then kind of be beyond the control of the governor.
It is safe to say, by the way, that the PRB has taken a significant loss in transparency in the last couple of years. It was not that long ago. You could go onto the PRB website and look at minutes, look at the reports on the result of a vote or the report about a potential parolee, and you could see where those votes came from, the logic behind them, etc. None of that's there now. That's a huge issue.
It's a huge issue we've been raising for years. You mentioned Mr. Shelton. I think that's an area where we started to see some improvement once he became chairman, but there were huge gaps of information missing, minutes not being posted online, votes not being posted, FOIA requests not being responded to. When we would ask questions of some of these people in committee, some of them were completely unaware of these things having taken place. So this administration is ultimately responsible for this. We didn't come out swinging. We treated the PRB appointees just like we treat the appointees to all these other positions. The problem was we saw far more of these problems with the PRB, folks not being transparent, the appointments being manipulated. When we asked reasonable questions of the governor's office, they wouldn't respond. One thing they're saying now is, well, this happened during COVID, and COVID created difficulties. Well, okay, COVID created a lot of difficulties, but all
4 years ago
commissions, we didn't see these problems. It was just PRB. So why did COVID singularly impact PRB and not everything else?
You all have legislation that you're going to file. I don't know if it's actually been filed yet, but I know you were all planning to file it. That would make some changes to PRB. I think it's safe to say that it's unlikely that it moves. It doesn't seem as if there are any Democrats that are on the bill or particularly publicly supportive of bucking the governor here. But that said, what do you want to do, and how do you think you can get it done in that environment?
Well, some of this legislation, it's very early, right? So I'm very hopeful that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the Senate give it a fair hearing. As you alluded to earlier in the conversation, there are Senate Democrats that are wildly uncomfortable with the way the governor's handled this. I assure you that there's people in the House that are wildly uncomfortable with the way this has been handled. I hope the governor has learned his lesson here. I hope that reasonable people can sit down at a table and chart a bipartisan path to fixing something that should truly be bipartisan. I don't think public safety is a Republican or Democrat issue. People that are being harmed because of the way the governor has handled the PRB are Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents. This is a bipartisan issue. I think that we need to shine a light on this, and we have been trying to shine a light on this for 4 years. Tragedy has struck. We predicted over and over again that tragedy would strike, and I just hope that people can put the politics to the side. People can put their personal ambition to the side, and they can sit down and fix something for the people of Illinois. I think that there are Democrat legislators that want to get this fixed. I know that there's Democrat legislators who want to get this fixed. I think the only barrier to fixing the PRB for far into the future is sitting in the governor's mansion, and I hope that he comes to his senses and can find a solution and work with people. That's all we've been asking for the last 3.5 years. And I think there's a lot of attention on this now, and I hope we can get it accomplished.
But what do you really want out of a PRB? I mean, is it the Republican view that nobody should ever get parole? I mean, in a lot of these instances, we're talking about old people who have served 40, 50, 60 years of a crime that are being let out. It's not every case, but there are a lot of cases like that.
Sure.
I mean, and they're not all read from Shawshank. I mean, right? That are clearly rehabilitated and are just never going to get out. But tell me what your view of what parole should look like is, because I don't know that we've seen a clear understanding of that from your side.
Well, I think we've been very consistent for 4 years, and especially if anyone's followed committee hearings or even our public comments, right? I don't think politics should be involved in the PRB. I don't think Democrat legislators or Republican legislators should be really dictating what happens at the PRB. Our job is to put up guardrails to make sure that the process is handled appropriately. And the best guardrail to making sure that happens is having qualified people serving at the PRB. It's no different than any other function in government. I want qualified people working on healthcare issues, qualified people with the appropriate background working on education issues. When it comes to the PRB, we need folks with law enforcement background, with criminal justice background, with prosecutors, defense attorneys, people that understand the system. I have voted for good Democrat appointees. I have voted against bad Republican appointees. I don't want this to be a Republican Democrat thing. We want to have a PRB that is independent, and we want to have a PRB that is full of qualified individuals that are making well-reasoned decisions on behalf of the people of Illinois. The governor has treated the PRB as a political landing ground for some of his allies, and he has manipulated the process so the PRB reflects his personal philosophy on criminal justice. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think Governor Pritzker has the background to be dictating that. He should be pointing qualified individuals there that can do the right job.
Senator, before we let you go, it seems that the appointments issue is not just limited to PRB at this point. It was there were some consternation from Senator Murphy, who chairs the committee, the Executive Appointments Committee, over the reappointment of Alicia Tate-Nadu as director of IEMA, who oversaw a temporary employee who billed the state for something like $1 million in overtime. It was, a very excessive situation, and she was pretty blatantly frustrated by the fact that Tate-Nadu said that there had been no changes to policy because of it, or anything to stop this from happening in the future. Do you think we're coming to a head here, even between Democrats, and you're not a Democrat for sure, but you're watching this happen in real time on executive appointments and in the Senate chamber? Are we coming to a head here for a battle between Senate Democrats and the governor's office?
Well, so first, I'm gonna take a second to answer this, because I really want to highlight something here. I would strongly encourage anyone that believes that that's kind of how that particular hearing went down to go back and review the video or listen to the audio, because I know the way some of the print media has covered it, it kind of reads like that. I think the Senate Democrats have gone out of their way, in my humble opinion. I believe the Senate Democrats have gone out of their way to try to help the governor and to provide the governor cover fire. And I think some of the governor's appointees have been so terrible that it's actually put the Senate Democrats in a bad spot. That particular hearing that you're referring to there with the IEMA director, I mean, they had greased the skids on that one so that she would fly right through. And I raised some questions, and the responses from the appointee were very troubling. And so the Senate Democrats were frustrated with our questioning. They tried to shut down our questioning, and I would not let that happen. And we've asked more questions, and that second round of questions generated even worse answers. And the responses from the appointee at that point in time, after the Senate Democrats had been trying to give cover fire for the entire hearing, generated the questions that you just referred to that Senator Murphy brought up. So if the governor would just appoint qualified people that can answer some basic questions, I think that this would be a really smooth process. As I said earlier, we have hundreds of people come through executive appointments a year. I think that we give the governor wide berth in terms of his appointees. As you know, largely news doesn't come out of our committee, but this PRB thing has blown up, I think, in the Senate Democrats' face, because there was an element of cowardice there, an unwillingness to hold the governor accountable, and that led to an incompetent PRB, and that incompetence at the PRB led to a tragic death. And I think the Senate Democrats are going to start recognizing that this, any tension that's there is only because the governor's terrible appointees are going to blow up in the Senate Democrats' face. You can't ask them to vote for a bad appointee to the PRB, and I mean, why would they do that? Why would the Senate Democrats continue to look the other way? So I don't want there to be tension with anybody. I want good government. I want government to work well. But the easiest way to solve any problems at executive appointments is for the governor to take politics out of the process and put qualified people forward. The Senate Democrats are doing everything they can to cover for him, but I think they're probably quite frustrated at this point in time.
Senator Jason Plummer, Republican from Edwardsville, sits on the Senate Executive Appointments Committee, which has been at the forefront of the Prisoner Review Board issue. Senator, thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks to Senator Plummer for his time. Let's move our attention now to a new book out about former Mayor Lori Lightfoot's tumultuous term in office with Greg Pratt of the Chicago Tribune. We are pleased to be joined now by Gregory Pratt. He is an investigative reporter at the Chicago Tribune, known, though, in a lot of circles for spending 4 years covering Lori Lightfoot's administration. And he is out with a new book. It's called "The City is Up for Grabs: How Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot Led and Lost a City in Crisis." Greg joins us now. Greg, congratulations on the book. First of all, I've seen a couple of excerpts and have really enjoyed them so far. You kind of got a firsthand seat or front row seat of all of the drama of the Lightfoot administration. What drew you to write a book about it?
Well, when she got elected first, I thought it was a special time and it would be fun to chronicle it in a book at some point. So there was that going on first and foremost, that, the city of Chicago is a big city with big city problems and big city things, and she's a big personality. Once you have COVID and the riots, it became a situation where I'm like, yeah, I always wanted to write a book. And now we've got stuff that should appeal to people all across the world, really. I mean, you have how you dealt with a global pandemic, how you dealt with riots, how you dealt with police misconduct, all issues that are dealt with everywhere. And then you add on the special habanero sauce that is Lori Lightfoot, and you've got yourself a really interesting story.
Habanero sauce is interesting because she is let's be frank, she's a hell of a personality, and I'm a downstater who lives in the suburbs now, so I'm not a city guy, but obviously anyone who pays attention or lives in Illinois should care about the success of the city. And I think there were a lot of people like me who were hopeful that she was kind of the nobody that nobody sent, that could almost like shake up the system with her, really strong personality, huge mandate that she won in that 2019 election. Immediately though, when she came in, it was just climbing uphill. What happened?
Well, I think that she was never able to adjust from prosecutor to politician, from campaigning to governing. And there's a few examples. And I talk about this. So on her first city council meeting, a couple days after she gets elected, after she gets sworn in, Alderman Ed Burke starts to mess with her and she slaps him down. And Burke, who had this reputation as being a master of the city council, looks like an old man who lost his way on the way to the bathroom. And that's fine. Nobody is going to cry for Ed Burke because he, at this point, is he's Ed Burke. He's facing corruption charges. He just kind of, for as far as a lot of people go, he's a jerk. Then, she mocks the FOP vice president who's coming up to the microphone, and she gets caught on the hot mic saying, "It's this FOP clown." And then that's fine. A lot of people aren't going to cry for him in Chicago because the FOP is as unpopular as
Darren Bailey.
Sure. As Bailey or something like that. So it's fine. But then she's slapping people left and right. And the way I say is, if you slap somebody who deserves a slapping, people are going to accept it. But when you're slapping 5 people a week, 5 people a day, people are going to say that's a little too much slapping. And that's the problem she ran into. Is early on she started she was just always in a fight. And there's the old saying that if you run into a jerk in the morning, okay, you ran into a jerk. If you ran into 10 jerks in the day, maybe you're the jerk.
And you've heard the phrase, politics is a game of addition, elections specifically, but she got the election part, but then she had to govern. And if you don't make any friends, and I think Brandon Johnson is finding this, if you don't make any new friends, you don't advance an agenda very far. And she really didn't seem to make many new allies as she became mayor.
Part of the issue, that's a great point. Part of the issue is she won in a landslide, and people didn't really she wasn't able to understand that she didn't win because with 76% of the vote, because everybody thought that she was the smartest, the toughest, the fairest, and the best looking. She won because she was an outsider running in a change election, influenced greatly by people's feelings of disgust as this longtime power broker is facing corruption charges. That's the atmosphere she's in. That's why she wins. And it doesn't help that Tony Preckwinkle had just come off this horrible fight over the soda tax, which, most of the voters love their soda. And they're angry at her. And, I always like to tell a story. I mean, people were pouring out their soda along the Bud Billiken parade in protest of Tony Preckwinkle, like the fall prior. So Mayor Lightfoot was not able to understand why she won. So she thought, I don't need new friends. I've got 76% of the vote. I can stand to lose some friends. And that was a gross mistake.
It's not just a mandate. You've got to have a governing majority too, and that's clearly what she never had. But the other thing about her personality that I couldn't figure this out, and maybe it's just that Rahm Emanuel is a better politician or just more skilled at this. But a lot of people tell you Rahm Emanuel's a jerk too, and he got things done. He was able to govern to a point at least. What was the difference? Was it just that she couldn't adjust?
So, and I use this expression a lot, and it makes my friend Justin Lawrence at Cranes laugh every time because he doesn't understand the word boo-boo. But I
don't know. We call our 2-year-old that a lot. So I don't know. Maybe a different meaning for different people.
There's a couple different boo-boos. So there's when you have a boo-boo, when you have an injury, you got to kick the boo-boo. You got to kiss the boo-boo. And Mayor Emanuel knew how to kick people. I mean, he kicked people all the time. He was a jerk. A lot of politicians and business leaders and newspaper people sometimes are jerks. The thing is that when you kick someone, sometimes you have to kiss the boo-boo. And Rahm would kiss the boo-boo. Rahm would call people and check on them and see how they're doing. And Mayor Lightfoot could do the hard power of politics, of cajoling, of threatening, of berating, but she couldn't kiss the boo-boo. And, that's really unfortunate. One of my favorite stories that's just wild is when Alderman Derek Curtis, who is a fairly straightforward alderman, he just wants the mayor to say nice things about him sometimes and help with some constituent services. When Alderman Curtis shot himself in the hand twice, he was upset that Mayor Lightfoot didn't call to check on him. And, that's a mistake. And when he expressed that in public, she sent him a series of increasingly belligerent, mocking text messages, and he unendorsed her. And that's a situation that's entirely self-inflicted on both their parts, I might add.
Literally in one case.
And it's you got to kick the boo-boo. Sometimes you have a fight and you call someone up and you say, hey, listen, I still respect you. I want to work with you. What is it you care about? We didn't work on this. And she couldn't do that.
So let's fast forward to the pandemic. There was a lot of simmering resentment between the Pritzker administration and the Lightfoot administration in the first few months of the pandemic. I don't think a lot of it came out at the time, but I think we were hearing things underground. Why was there such a battle internally between Pritzker and Lightfoot?
Well, Mayor Lightfoot believed that anything that happens in Chicago should go through her. And Governor Pritzker said, that's fine, but we have to move fast. And so you have this conflict of, and to be fair, COVID was disorienting. What do you mean? What do you mean we have to close down bars? What do you mean we have to close down parts of our economy and schools? I mean, that's legitimately a nightmare public policy situation for the governor, for the mayor, for the president at the time, for civil society. And she is a very conservative person. She doesn't want to be an alarmist. She wants to hold still and wait a little. And Governor Pritzker was like, okay, what do you mean we're going to have the St. Patrick's Day parade when cases are starting to spread? And there was a famous parade in Philadelphia in the 1919 pandemic that helped spread it. So he was complaining that she is a couple steps behind him all along the process. And eventually that starts to spill out more in public in the fall when he closes restaurants down again after a new wave. In her defense and in his defense, despite the fact that they were fighting about what to do, they didn't do the comedy show that Governor Cuomo and de Blasio were doing in New York. They decided to be adults and mature and try to present a united face, which I do think was worthwhile for the state in a situation of crisis. In any crisis, you don't want to see leaders running around. But she believed that she's very conservative, and she believed that the city is her domain, but it's really his domain.
And listen, Lord knows that I'm not a policy guy in line with Pritzker or the way his administration has done a lot of things, but it's not like he wanted to close things down. It's not like he said, I want to kill our economy. That's no sane person wants to do that. It's just, and of course, hindsight is 2020, and we can look back and say these things went on too long. The mask mandate went on way too long. But in that moment, I mean, there were real threats that like this could wipe out millions of people. So I have a hard time understanding why there was. I mean, was it solely economic that there was so much pushback?
There's just disrupting the way the world exists, which is genuinely scary. I mean, I remember we were looking at each other in the newsroom, and my colleague John Byrne says, and this is like early March, mid-March, getting closer to mid-March, and he's like, the Blue Line was completely packed. And by this time, people are starting to get freaked out, but the trains were still staying packed. And, people, and John Byrne is a very rational guy, and he wasn't scared or anything. He was just commenting on things are starting to escalate, but people aren't responding to it. People disrupting society is a really challenging thing. Society probably, we're as you can see with riots, we're just one disturbing event away from things going haywire.
Are those riots is what happened in the summer of 2020 in response to George Floyd? Is that when she kind of lost control?
A little bit. She was really angry at the insinuation that she didn't care about the black neighborhoods on the south and west side and that she sacrificed them for downtown, which, by the way, is not what happened. They were unprepared. They were responding and things got out of control. And it's you can fault them for being unprepared, but she wasn't making a calculated sacrifice. I think that it was a really tough situation, but she was really, really angry, and that really hurt her. And then going forward, she couldn't get a handle on crime. It continued to rise into 2021 pretty dramatically. She couldn't acknowledge that the strategies of her police superintendent weren't working. So she didn't respond to that in any way. And that's where she really lost control.
Was there beef with Kim Foxx at any point in this? I mean, a lot of the crime issues were simply because Fox just didn't prosecute a lot of offenders. I mean, what was that relationship like?
They were friendly, and there's a funny little story where Kim Foxx, when Rahm is still in the race, and Kim Foxx goes to visit Lori Lightfoot's campaign office in 2018, and she knows Lori, so she goes to check it out. She's not there to endorse or anything. She's just checking it out quietly. Somehow Rahm's people find out, and David Spielvogel, who was a close Rahm advisor, calls Kim Foxx, who he knew very well, and says, hey, Kim, I'm not telling you what to do, but you got to understand this lady is crazy. And Kim, takes it under advisement and whatever and moves on with her life. And eventually, Kim Foxx comes to the realization that Mayor Lightfoot is not a astute politician. She's dismayed by the amount of crap talking that Lori Lightfoot does. She's concerned about some of those issues, and their relationship falls apart. I do think that there's some misnomers about Kim Foxx in terms of not prosecuting. I think that some of her language and some of the things going on in society have led to police laying down on the job sometimes. I think that is fair. I'm not entirely sure that it's fair to say she doesn't prosecute, because she brings the stat that she uses and the courts uses. She'll bring like 90% of the cases that they bring to her. And cops have the arrest rate from like 2018 to 2021 went down dramatically. And, some of that is that a lot of officers felt that departments and leaders weren't going to have their back, right? So they're like, we're not going to go out on a limb as much. And that's really unfortunate, because it becomes a spiral. And I just think it's unfair to pin it on one person. But Lori started to point the finger at Kim, who used to be her friend, and that situation got pretty ugly.
Going into her campaign for re-election, I think everyone knew she was a long shot to win, even if she snuck into the runoff. Was she seriously confident that she could win re-election after everything that went wrong?
They saw their path as her against Paul Vallis, and that they would be able to beat Paul Vallis because Paul is a old white guy who is going to scare people because of his conservative affiliations. And so they thought that they could beat Paul. And I think there's a pretty good chance they could have beat Paul. I also think Paul could have beat them. But, I don't think she beats Shui Garcia. I probably don't think she beats Brandon Johnson. I think she can beat Paul Vallis because this is a blue city. And Paul, there's a couple little things in the book about that. I mean, when he lost as a long shot in 2019, his people told him stop going on conservative talk radio shows. And he wouldn't do it. Because like Paul's perspective is, I'm not there as a conservative. I'm not there to validate. I'm just there to talk about ideas. And that's not the way politics works. No. Just going on the Jeannie Ive show is going to tar you with Democrats. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. I'm not Jesus. I'm not a philosopher. I do know that politics does not play by Jesus or philosophy rules.
So I know she didn't talk to you for the book, which I'm sure is frustrating, but she didn't talk to anybody really at the end except a couple of very friendly newsletter writers. What is her legacy? I think we a lot of us would kind of look back and think it was kind of a trash can on fire sort of administration, and then we see the Johnson administration, which is essentially clueless. How do you think Lightfoot's term in office will be remembered?
First of all, I think that people will look back with some positivity and affection. I think they will remember the tough lady who stood strong during COVID. I mean, they're not worried about the nuances of who did what. They like the fact that she went out and she would talk, and they did their little cutouts and they did the memes. People will always remember that. People like big personalities. People will look back affectionately on Mayor Lightfoot there. I think that Mayor Lightfoot was deserves to be commended for her talk about equity, for her talk about investing on the South and West Side. The way she would tell it is not accurate. She's not the only one. Rahm did plenty. She did plenty. She took credit for some of what Rahm did. But she deserves credit for talking about equity because equity is a real problem. She deserves credit for being tough. I think people will look back with some affection. I think that as a leader, you can't sugarcoat the fact that you got rejected by 85% of your voters. And you can say, well, actually, I was really good, but the voters were in a fog. The voters were stupid, whatever. No, the voters are the voters, and they rejected you. They voted for you 74%. They voted you out 85%. So I think her legacy will be somewhat more positive as time goes by. I know that some people compare her to Johnson, and like conservatives would be angry at Lori Lightfoot, and she's actually pretty conservative on a lot of issues. She just doesn't know how to be with someone, So like on politically. So I think there will be some positive stuff, but people will also remember the chaos. They'll remember the dysfunction. They'll remember her and the census cowboy and the stupid hat. And so I think it's complicated, but it's not all bad.
Greg Pratt from the Chicago Tribune. His book is The City is Up for Grabs: How Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot Led and Lost a City in Crisis. It's on your Amazons and in your bookstores. Greg, thanks so much. Congratulations again on the book, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to Gregory Pratt of the Chicago Tribune. His book is available on Amazon or in all your favorite bookstores. Highly recommend the read. Of the excerpts I've seen are very interesting and compelling storytelling from Greg. So thanks to Greg for his time today. Thanks to Senator Jason Plummer for his time. And thank you for taking time to listen or watch wherever you may be consuming this podcast. We really do truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to our podcasts, watch our podcasts, read our newsletter, and interact with us as so many of you do. And we're always thankful for that. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you again soon here on the Illinoize podcast.